I'm so glad y'all came by again. We've got another story, and this one is about the groundhog. So if you just get your cup of hot chocolate and sit back, relax, and we'll read this story aloud, and you'll enjoy it, and maybe you'll learn something. Well, just a few more days on February 2nd, and we will all know if the weather will get pretty and warm or if we will have more cold weather, said Papa. Everybody knows that if a groundhog sees his shadow, we will have 6 more weeks of bad weather. At least that's what all of the old-timers always said. Mama began to laugh and say, that is just superstition and not a word of truth in it. Yeah, but Farmer Brown and his friends really believe in Groundhog's Day, so I just like to get in the spirit too, said Papa. Usually in the late afternoon, he would go up the tunnel, poke his head outside, and if he saw no one, he would waddle his way through the tall green grass toward Farmer Jones's garden. It was the time of year that not much was growing, but there were still some late winter crops that he could salvage, and then he could take them home to Mama for supper. Plowing would be starting soon, but Farmer Jones always plowed according to the groundhog superstition. Papa thought it was funny, but he loved being the center of attention. Rocky sat over in the corner playing with a little truck that his dad had found when he went hunting food for the family. He didn't say much, but when Papa talked about his shadow, something made Rocky's stomach hurt. He didn't like the idea of a shadow that followed you. In fact, it wasn't that he didn't like the shadow. He was really afraid of his shadow. He wasn't sure why the idea of having a shadow scared him, but it did, and he was just too embarrassed to mention it to Papa because he didn't want him to think he was a baby. He tried to be a big boy. He tried to make Papa proud, but sometimes he would think about having a shadow, and it would make his paws kind of shake. He had heard Mama talk about the older groundhogs shaking, and she said it was their nerves. But Rocky thought to himself, I'm not old enough. So how could it be my nerves, he asked. The truth was Rocky didn't understand what nerves were, and he didn't know what a shadow was. He just knew he was afraid when anybody mentioned it. He wanted to run to Mama and crawl up in her lap, but he didn't want the others to laugh at him. So for now, he was just hoping he would be really quiet and all of this nonsense would simply go away. Have you ever been afraid of anything? Have you ever seen other people having fun but it scared you and you just didn't know why? Well, this is the way it was for Rocky. Farmer Jones knew where the groundhog cave was, so he kept an eye on it, especially this time of the year. He usually just watched Papa come in and go out. He could tell if there was a shadow or not, and then he would tell his friends. Some farmers that he had known would catch the groundhog and hold him in a cage until the day came for them to see if he had a shadow, but not Farmer Jones. He just watched. He had never tried to catch a Papa. However, that year was different. Farmer Jones had been really sick, and he was getting older. So he had asked a couple of the younger guys to ride over to the farm and watch the groundhog come out of his cave. They had agreed, but Hermie was not patient, not at all. He had talked to his buddy Lee into going a couple of days early so they could make sure they knew exactly where to go. He was thinking to himself, if I get close enough, I will grab that groundhog and put him in a cage. Then we won't have to come back and wait. But he did not tell Lee his plan. Farmer Jones had told them where to hide to watch the cave, so they were very quiet when they sneaked close. Papa had just left, and they never saw him go. But they watched for a few minutes anyway. In the meantime, Rocky had grabbed his ball and was tossing it around in the tunnel when it accidentally hit a rock and bounced outside the opening of the cave. Have you ever done that? Have you ever been bouncing your ball and it hit something and it go the opposite way? Well, that's what happened to Rocky that day. Rocky was looking everywhere for his ball. He had to be, he was very scared because he wasn't allowed outside of the cave. And he looked and he saw his ball stuck in a bush. So he looked to the left and he looked to the right and he didn't see anybody. So he ran over to the bush. That time a great big hand swooped down and grabbed him. Before he knew what had happened, he found himself in a wire cage and he couldn't get out. Suddenly he heard the guy in the stocking hat say, "Why did you catch him? We are just supposed to watch him." Hermie just chuckled and said, "Now, February the 2nd, all we have to do is walk out in the backyard. We don't have to come over here to see if the groundhog has a shadow." "But what are you going to do with him when you're finished with him?" cried Lee. "Well, since you're so worried about it, I will let you bring him back over here. Or you can just throw him in the river." "What?" cried Lee. "He will drown." Hermie just laughed. "It's up to you." Poor little Rocky. He sat crouched in his cage and thought, what am I gonna do? For the next day, Rocky was so terrified. He had backed up in the corner of the cage and was almost afraid to move. Lee would bring him some cabbage leaves and some carrot pieces and even a couple of tomatoes, but Rocky was too afraid to even eat. He didn't know if he would ever see Mama and Papa again. He remembered Mama telling him a story about a little duck that got trapped when he fell in a deep hole and he couldn't get out. The little duck looked up and remembered that God had made all creatures, great and small. He had always been told that God loved what he had created. So Rocky looked at the twinkling stars and said, "Dear God, can you help me get home to my family, please?" Everything was really quiet, so Rocky finally dozed off. But suddenly he was awakened by loud talking. He opened his eyes and there was Hermie and Lee looking at him. He was backed into a corner of the cage that was still kind of dark. Hermie was saying, "Now we get to see if there's going to be a shadow or not." But Rocky was too scared to move. So Hermie grabbed the cage and set it out in the sunshine because it was a beautiful day. Guess what? The shadow appeared. "There it is," cried Hermie, "the groundhog shadow. So I guess we're going to have 6 more weeks of bad weather. I don't like that. I know what I'm going to do. I'm just going to get rid of you." And he yelled, and then he reached down to grab the cage, but Lee was faster. He said, "Oh, no, you don't. I'm taking him back to his cave. He is just a baby, and you're not going to hurt him." With that, Lee turned around, hopped in his truck, and in just moments, he was at Farmer Brown's farm. He quickly ran to the grassy patch outside of Rocky's cave and opened the door. Rocky was so surprised he just sat there for a few minutes, but Lee was patient and he talked softly to him. "Come on, little guy, run back to your cave where you will be safe. It's okay that you saw your shadow today. At least you are back home. Run now." And he tapped the cage and Rocky took off, and in moments he was inside, safe and sound. But then he remembered what Lee had said. It's okay that you saw your shadow. Rocky didn't see his shadow. He was too scared. But his shadow was there because Lee and Hermie saw it. It didn't hurt me, thought Rocky. Maybe it was nothing to be scared of. Suddenly he looked up, and once again he spied his ball that had rolled into the bush. He looked up, he looked down, he looked all around, and then he looked over his head because that's where the hand came from. And he saw nothing, and he quickly waddled over to get his favorite ball. Suddenly he saw it, his shadow. It moved with him when he walked. Wow, he thought, I was so afraid of my shadow, and he's been here all the time. It just took the bright sunshine for me to see him. Quickly he returned to his cave. It was dark in the cave, and his shadow was gone. But then he remembered his prayer last night and how God had answered it by letting Lee bring him home. Suddenly he realized that just like the shadow, God is with you all the time, in the darkness and in the light. He didn't ever have to be scared again. He had 2 new friends to go with him, his shadow, but most of all, he had God. Hope you enjoyed this little story, and please come back and visit us again. Toodles! And now, I want to read you a verse from the Bible, Proverbs 3:5. Trust in the Lord with all thine heart, and lean not unto thine own understanding. We may not always understand everything, but God does. And if we trust him, he will take care of us. See ya. Bye.
It's my happy day, I want to sing it all the day. My best friends are always with me. We sing, we dance, we laugh, we are happy every day. Have fun with us, let's say happy, 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 happy.